eating disorders are not only confined to women, they're now seen in a growing number of young men. A 2007 Harvard University study showed that 25% of people with anorexia or bulimia were men, confirming that men are more susceptible to eating disorders than previously thought.
Well, I think a lot of this might have to do with the obsessive nature of our celebrity culture and internet, posting photos of yourself. You want to look as good as the other person, and, you know, there's body envy and skinny jeans for men. Men are having to fit into these pants that are made for women, or should be on women, not men. And you can't have an ounce of fat on you, otherwise you're thought of as, you know, a lard butt, or, you know, out of shape. And so I think part of it is the way it's all amplified in the culture. And then if you're a vulnerable person, then you could get caught in this spiral, and it's well, I mean, it is a disease, because I've seen what's happened to people. A woman in our neighborhood, actually right around the corner, growing up from a family, I think they had 9 kids in their family, and I would always see her walking around the block. She would walk all day long. She died of anorexia. But we don't hear much about men with anorexia. So we thought we'd bring on Brian Cuban, who is a survivor of what's called body dysmorphia. And he's also a lawyer, and he specializes in First Amendment issues. And we thought we would talk to him about this. His book that was released last year is called Shattered Image: My Triumph Over Body Dysmorphic Disorder. And he also runs a great blog called The Cuban Revolution that he discusses a lot of First Amendment issues and other news stories on it. And he joins us now. He's also the brother of Mark Cuban, who, of course, is the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, very colorful character. And Brian joins us now. Brian, good to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
So, Brian, tell us about, you know, how you got yourself into this position where you found yourself basically disappearing. I mean, you're doing enormous damage to your body. You were someone who's very smart, very accomplished, and yet you suffered from, and people don't know oftentimes the term, but dysmorphic disorder, and there's a mental element to it, and it has great physical and mental consequences.
That's correct, and ironically, following up to what I was just hearing while I was waiting, what happened to me had nothing to do with the media. It was as a result of childhood trauma. I was a very shy child, the middle of 3 kids, in classic middle child syndrome, and I had a very difficult relationship with my mom. There was a lot of fat shaming in my house. I would be called a fat pig if she thought I was eating too much, and that's what she had done to her by her mom. You know, it runs downhill. And because of that, I started to eat a lot. Depression set in, and I became a very heavy child, going to, just around 270 by the time I was, 11, 12 years old. And then there was serious weight bullying that started at school. And the weight bullying escalated actually into a physical assault. And all of these things, combined with my shy, reserved nature as it was, came together to kind of create a perfect storm in which I started to see myself as, my mother would say, this fat pig every time I looked in the mirror. And by the time I was a freshman at Penn State, that was my whole world. And when your whole world is out of control, as it seemed to you, like, what can I do to get it back in control? And as what often happens with eating disorders, you turn to food, the one thing you have control over.
And so that was what you could. That's what you could maintain order and control over. You yourself could manipulate that, or calm the storm that was brewing inside you by controlling food.
Absolutely, and there was a little more to it for me. I thought the thinner I got, based on what I saw, the kids going to the prom and the kids getting girlfriends, those were my media images, the kids I saw every day. That if I could look like them, I would finally be accepted, wouldn't be bullied, wouldn't be called a fat pig. But as body dysmorphic disorder set in, no matter how thin I got and no matter how much I starved myself, I saw this huge fat stomach in the mirror, every day. And so then, of course, you have to starve yourself more and more and more. And I had descended into anorexic behavior.
855-40-LAURA, the number here. And I've asked my listeners to chime in about their own experiences. Maybe they themselves have suffered from anorexia or bulimia, and maybe they were younger, maybe they were in college, maybe beyond, or you know someone closely who has also suffered. I mean, I personally know people in college who suffered from it. It was terrible. I mean, we're talking hair loss, tooth decay. God knows what type of internal damage they did to themselves. But it was prevalent. It was prevalent in college. I can tell you that.
And it's still prevalent in college. I mean, and for guys, and for a guy going through it, and then after I was anorexic, I became bulimic. I stayed bulimic till I was 45 years old.
Oh my goodness!
And for a guy going through it, there's so much shame. They just don't come forward as much as women. There's shame for women too, but there's more of a conversation.
Now, you struggled with other issues as well, right?
Yes.
You're a recovering alcoholic?
I'm a recovering alcoholic, recovering cocaine addict, and a recovering steroid addict.
And
I came very close to suicide, and there were 2 trips to a psychiatric facility, all stemming from the body dysmorphic disorder.
And tell us more about your mom and your situation at home. That sounds really, really, really difficult. Is she still with us? Is she still alive?
Yes, and we have a very good relationship now through therapy. My mom had a very abusive relationship with her mother. There was a lot of fat shaming, a word that didn't exist back then,
right.
Fat shaming in her household, and those were the tools she learned to hand down to her kids. And because I was the one at home most of the time, because I didn't have a lot of friends and I was very shy, I caught the brunt of it. And it was very difficult. I was called a dumb bunny when I would have bad grades at school. And so, you can see how a young child could start seeing himself or herself in that way when this is what you're told. And then when you're told that by the other kids at school, it becomes who you are.
And how old are you now?
I was very lucky because my mother was willing to step up and talk to me about how she became that way and allow me to understand what happened. Not about blame, about understanding. A lot of families don't have that. A lot of families, there's denial, there's guilt, there's shame, so it doesn't get talked about. I feel very fortunate that my mother was who she was, as I got older and stepped up and we talked about those things.
And how old are you now?
I'm 53.
Okay, and tell us about your life now. I mean, you've turned it around on the addictions.
Correct.
And that's awesome.
I went into recovery in 2007, and I haven't engaged in bulimic behavior or any addictive behavior since. Lots of therapy, lots of exploring my childhood and how I got the way I was, getting honest about where I came from and how that happened. And now my goal is to, take that suffering and take the awareness I have acquired about, how these things happen and let other guys know and women that, hey, it's normal to feel shame, but if you can drop that wall for 1 second and let people love you and let people help you, you can recover.
And I think that people, oftentimes, especially when they don't know anyone who's gone through this, they'll say things like, "Okay, snap out of it. Have a cheeseburger. I mean, you're fine. Don't. This is ridiculous. Just eat."
You would not believe what I've heard. You would not believe what I've heard. I've had, some of the Neanderthal views are just incredible. I've had guys ask me when my period is. I've had stuff like that. But I look at that as opportunity. Opportunity to change. It just shows you how far we have to come. How far we haven't come as far as guys are concerned with regards to the stigma and the stereotypes.
Is there any common thread that you find, especially among men, who really fall victim to this disease? I mean, is there something in family? Is it, as you said, shaming? Have you recognized this in your look at this?
I think every story is different. My story is different from others. We all experience life in our own way. I've had common threads and I've had different ones, where their experience and how they got to their eating disorder is totally different from mine. But one thing, the common thread in the people that email me every week is that they think they're the only one going through it, which I did, especially the men. You think you're the only one, because how dare a male have an eating disorder? You know, men are leaders, men are wage earners, you know, men are cavemen. Men don't stick their finger down their throat, and men don't starve themselves. That's what society has told us. That breeds shame. That breeds seclusion. That breeds isolation. That breeds not seeking help.
Well, and I think that you also went through this period where you did a lot of cosmetic surgery.
I did.
That was going to help make you feel better?
I did. I thought cosmetic surgery would change that fat kid I saw in the mirror. I spent about $20,000, you know, which...
You're a very handsome man, by the way. I'm looking at your picture.
Thank you very much.
I'm not being cute here. You're a handsome guy. Look, you're good looking.
Well, but, you know, as we know, body dysmorphic disorder has, you know, little to do with that. It was all around that bullied little boy. How could I change that? How could I be accepted? So I spent about $20,000 in plastic surgery, and the only reason I stopped, Laura, is because I went broke. I couldn't max out my credit cards anymore.
That's expensive.
It is, and there, you know, and you read stories all the time about people spending $100,000 or this or that, you know. So, you know, I understand how that mindset works, you know, and the only reason I stopped is because I couldn't max out any more credit cards.
And
it didn't make me feel any better about myself.
Right. And how did your family react to all of this? I mean, obviously we all know your famous brother.
Supportive.
Did he help you? I mean, did he try to help you along the way?
Yes, they were very supportive in terms of my addictions. Now, they didn't know about the eating disorders until I went public. That's how shameful it is.
Wow.
I would rather admit I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic than have an eating disorder. And they have been very supportive. My entire family has, right down the road.
That's amazing. Well, I mean,
that's how much shame there is.
Yeah, to have hidden that. Teresa in Amarillo, Texas, and Brian Cuban's you're in Dallas, right?
Correct.
Right. I love Dallas. I'll be there in a few weeks. Teresa, go ahead.
I was just going to comment that I'm not obviously I'm not a man, but I can completely associate with what he's talking about, because I was anorexic, bulimic for about 15 years, 10 to 15 years, and had body dysmorphic disorder, and it absolutely did not stem from any outside influences. It was a control issue for me. My mother was an alcoholic and kind of a rough childhood, and I was born with a partial cleft palate, so I already had some self-esteem issues. And for me, because everything was so out of order, it was a control issue. It was something that I could focus on, that I could control, and that gave me power. And then I felt like it was a demon that kind of just went on its own and got bigger and bigger and bigger, yes. And it comes to a point where you can't get control of it.
How are you doing now, Teresa?
Oh, I'm great. I feel I've been healed for several years, probably I would say 10 to 15 years, through the grace of the Lord that I've been healed. And I think that it's not anything that ever really fully leaves you, and that's what people don't really understand, because I'm like 5'4", weigh 135 pounds. Every time I look in the mirror, I see a 300-pound woman.
Do you really? Gosh, that's a great weight.
It never goes away. It's something that you can't ever get rid of once it gets in your head. And I wish, even when you can go back and you're in a healthy weight, and I'm very healthy and I'm strong and I work out a lot, and I'm in a good place mentally, it's such a sad thing, because it just never leaves your brain. And I can't imagine being a man and dealing with it. Whenever for a woman, you can talk to your girlfriends.
Right,
you
man,
it's
today. Like, you seem like, and Brian, I'm sure you had this. That's such a girl thing. That's a girl, and you said, you made cracks about you.
And she brings up a good point. People ask me all the time, "Are you cured?" I still have the thoughts every single day. It's how I deal with them that's changed through a lot of therapy, as I'm sure she can identify with. So those thoughts come to me every day.
And you've brought an enormous amount of attention to this issue. And again, I've seen what this does to people firsthand, and it's devastating. And a really close friend of mine, a good friend of mine in New Jersey, who's a dad. He's probably now close to 70, I would imagine. And just the heartbreak that he went through with his daughter, just trying to help her and doing everything he can to help her. And she's doing a lot better, but boy, it's heart-wrenching for all involved, and physically, mentally, there are a lot of scars that remain. And I'm so glad you brought this to the fore, Brian. Thank you so much for writing the book, Shattered Image, and for talking about this. You're brave for talking about it, and I'm really grateful you came on the show.
Thank you so much for having me on and giving me the opportunity to let others know that there is hope. Excellent.
Brian Cuban, who looks like he's doing fantastic. You can also go on his great blog, his website. We'll link it up on lauraingraham.com. And it's very helpful, a lot of interesting little pieces that he's written and lots of links to other articles for people who are suffering. We'll take a break. Don't go away.
The Laura Ingraham Show.